Welcome to the Little as Much podcast. I'm Cameron.
And this is Morgan.
We are just a young couple desiring to serve God and raise a family in this present world based off Titus 2:12.
We have seen God take the little we have to offer and do much more than we could ever imagine.
Join us as we share personal real-life experiences and what God is teaching us along the way.
We will cover topics of faith, family, and everyday life from a Christian and biblical perspective.
Welcome back, everybody. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about how we bought our house and how God worked in that situation.
So, as most dating couples do, once you start getting serious in your relationship, a lot of times you start talking about marriage, plans for the future. Cameron and I definitely knew that it was God's will for us to be together. We had that peace, and so we had started talking about when we wanted to get married, engagement, things like that. But one thing, of course, that comes along with that is we were going to need a place to live after we got married.
Yeah, and at the time, I was basically living at a fire station, whether that was on my 24-hour shifts as a career firefighter or just living at the volunteer station I was a part of. I was basically using that volunteer station as an apartment pretty much and just spending the night there, spending all my time there. So I basically just needed a house to be able to live in, to put all my stuff in.
We couldn't live at the fire station.
No. As much as I probably wanted to, we couldn't live at the fire station. And Morgan and I, we both knew that we wanted a short engagement. We wanted to keep it about 6 months or even shorter if possible, but we would like to keep it around 6 months.
Yeah, so that was definitely a goal that we had. We knew we didn't want to drag it out. We were ready. We knew we wanted to get married. So we started kind of making sure we got things lined up to get a house. Something that we definitely desired and were on the same page was we wanted to be close to our church, if possible. Somewhere between like 10 to 20 minutes from the church. However, you can't always have everything you want right at the beginning. And so we definitely kept that in mind.
Right.
We definitely looked at houses that were further than that from the church for sure. But that was our heart's desire, was definitely to be in that range. And God definitely knows your heart. He knows your desires. He puts desires in your heart. And we just felt like that was something that He was leading us in that direction. But we definitely weren't opposed to realizing, hey, we might need to look farther out. It could be that God doesn't want us that close right now. So we kept our options definitely open, but that was something we desired. Something else we definitely had talked about and we're on the same page on was we were just going to use Cameron's income to buy the home, to plan out our monthly payments for the main bills that we were going to be having that come along with owning a home, because we did know that once we started a family after we got married, that I wanted to be able to stay home. Cameron wanted me to be able to stay home with our future children, and so we had to keep that in mind. So it made things a little tricky because
the 2020 market was just super crazy. The housing market, it was like houses came up for sale pretty much everywhere, but there was so much competition in our area that even if we were to put an offer on a house at asking price, somebody would overbid us over top of asking price, paying like closing costs for both sides as well. And so it was just super crazy. And most of the houses, they just went for more than what I could afford based on my salary. And plus, a lot of the houses in our area were just super expensive. It was hard to find a house in our price range that someone didn't just jump on. There was other young couples that were buying houses, and a lot of the people in our area, a lot of the older people, they like to invest in some of these houses and rent them out. So we were competing with so many different people, so many different types of people just for a small house for us to get started.
Yeah, it was one of those things where we would put an offer and they would end up coming back and saying like, well, there was 4 more offers before you've even put yours in, but we can let you know something. So we had looked, we made offers, but we were not getting anywhere with the budget that we had and with the way the market was. It was really hard for us to be able to get anything, move forward. So
and a lot of those competitive offers were even on houses that needed a good bit of work.
Yeah.
Like we were willing
like
to put out
jobs.
the wood. Yeah. we were willing to put out the work for the house and make it livable, but they were just going for way more than what I was willing to pay for that house.
Yeah. We were kind of getting a little bit discouraged, but we just kept, making sure, we just kept praying about it. We kept trying to keep our hopes up and just kept, looking, kept putting out offers. And then it was in the midst of all of this, a couple actually started coming to our church. They were an older couple. And this is just something that is an encouragement. Be close to your church family. God puts us in a local body, and it says that we need to be part of a local church for a reason. We need other believers. We need brothers and sisters in Christ to lean on. So we had our church, a lot of people in the church were praying for us. They knew we were looking for a house. They were, sending us links to different houses. So word was kind of getting around in our church. Plus we have a small church, so we were looking for a house. So this couple heard that Cameron and I were wanting to get married. We were wanting to go ahead and get a home. And I believe that it was the wife actually came to us first and kind of was like feeling the waters and had asked me, I think, like, hey, y'all are thinking about buying a house. My husband, he actually has a small house not far from the church. Is this something you'd be interested in? She didn't give us too many details. Right. But I was like, sure, that would be great. And so then I believe that the husband ended up coming to you.
Yeah, he came to me and he was basically telling me a little bit about the house. He had married his wife a little bit later in life, and he had this house that was 10 minutes away from the church, and he basically just sat on it. He kept it for 10 years. He had it for 30 years, I think. He moved into it in the 80s and had lived there for several years, and then moved out when he got married.
And then as he got married, he would just come back and he was doing renovations the last carpet, 10 years.
New doors, new windows, updates on basically the whole house. And the new AC unit and not furnace, but the heat pump. He updated a whole lot of stuff in those 10 years that he basically wasn't living in it. He wasn't occupying it. And he came up to me and said, hey, would you like to come look at it sometime? And I said, well, sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So me, Morgan, and her parents, we all came over one evening and took a look at it. And I don't know about Morgan, but I immediately fell in love with it. It was such a good house. It was such a good location. The location that the house is in, it has sidewalks. It's close to a park. You can walk the sidewalks, and it's just a great little neighborhood. Perfect for starting a
family. It was absolutely ideal. Everything about it. The yard was nice. It was flat. The house was perfect. But we were very nervous going into it, though, because he had not talked to us about price at all. No. And we knew what the market was. And we were looking at this house and how close it was to a park and had the nice neighborhood and how, the area that it was in and everything about it, and we were going, there's no way we are going to be able to afford this. So, and I remember clear as day, we stood in the kitchen after we had gone through and looked at everything. And he started asking us, he was like, talk to me about price, talk to me about what you can do. And we were so almost embarrassed. We were like, we really can't do too much. And we explained our situation, and it was just God. He ended up saying he really wanted us to have the home. He felt like God was, definitely showing him that it was time for him to let the house go, and that God had brought us into his life at that exact time. It just, on both ends, everybody could just see God's hand working, and we fell in love with the house, and he offered us an amazing deal.
Yeah, it was a really good deal. So much that other houses in our area were going for way more, and I think the assessed value of our house was a good $20,000 to $30,000 more than what he had made the offer for. He had wanted to get out of the house, and I was blown away by it. I couldn't believe that he wanted that low of a price for it, but I knew that he was wanting us to have the house, and, God had worked in his heart, and he just desired to help a young couple in the church. And, God really worked in that situation. He made everything beautiful in his time.
Yeah.
And, without God, we couldn't have done it. So we started meeting with a mortgage or a loan or a lender at the time, not long after we had talked about pricing.
Yeah.
And it kind of was a little discouraging at the time because, the interest rates, everybody doesn't like, and nobody likes an interest rate because it's just extra money that you have to pay each month. But, the interest rates at the time, they weren't really as satisfying or as low as what I was hoping they would be. And it was just hard for me. I wasn't making a whole lot of money. I had a little bit of debt. So, it was kind of hard for me to get approved for a decent amount.
And I think that's with any, young couple. What, you were 22 or 23?
I was 22. Yeah.
Yeah. You were 22 when we were trying to do all of this. So, he was young, and I think that is, hard for anybody. You're still trying to build your credit and do all those things, to set yourself up. And he was trying to buy a house at 22. So there was all of these different struggles. And then we were just basing what we were pre-approved for and what we got approval for a loan off of just his income, because we really felt like that's what God wanted.
Yeah.
And even the wonderful price that this man had offered us, it was still just a little bit off.
Yeah, it was right around $50 to $100 more than, like, we did it all out on paper, and it came out to be a $50 to $100 more than what I could afford each month after we did all the bills, all the cell phone bills and truck payments and all of that. And it just didn't look like it was going to work out when we put it down on paper.
Yeah. And we had definitely talked, and it was something big that we had to pray about because we also, the way we were doing it, we weren't going to be able to get like a first-time home buyer loan at this point. So we needed a down payment. And that is something that we prayed about because I had been able to save a little bit of money. So even though we weren't wanting to put my finances toward what a monthly payment was going to be, we had prayed about, using some of what I had in savings to use as a down payment to get the loan and payments down to a price that we were going to be able to manage on Cameron's salary. Which was a big decision for me because he hadn't even bought, or I didn't know if he had bought an engagement ring at that point. I'm not sure if at this exact point
I think at that time I did have it.
Yeah. And so we weren't even engaged yet, but I was having to make this big decision with, do I take this chunk of money and use it for a down payment? And I ended up praying about it, of course, getting counsel from my parents, which is also my pastor and pastor's wife. And we all felt like God's hand was in this so much that it was the right thing for me to be able to use some of my savings and use as a down payment to get the loan to be at a manageable place. And so I did that. Something, though, that I want to just take a couple minutes to talk to young girls, though, that are out there in relationships, definitely be careful. Sometimes you can build a case in your mind that this is the person you are absolutely 100% going to marry, and you get caught up in the infatuation of it. But it's not about just your feelings. You have to know for sure that it is what God wants. And if there are any red flags, to put yourself out there in a risk, like financially or something. I think I'm probably not the only person this had happened to, but I had also was a little gun shy because, I had previous relationships where maybe your boyfriend's saying like, oh yeah, why don't we get on the same phone plan and I'll just start paying your phone bill. I have to do it anyway later. And then he dumps you and you're boyfriendless and you don't have a phone. Things like that, they can happen. And so you want to make sure you're making wise decisions. And it's not just feeling an infatuation or something that you are wanting as a young lady that is wanting to get married. Before you were ever to make any kind of decision like this, you need to have the peace of God. You need to know for sure. And that is something me and Cameron had. I had no worries putting that down payment down after I knew that I had the peace of God. God had already made it clear that I was going to marry Cameron. I knew this was his will for our life. And so we were able to make that decision and be able to do that together. And it was able to all work out for us. But like Cameron said, we were meeting with the mortgage company, and still, even with me putting the down payment down, the interest rates were killing us.
Yeah, it was still super high, pretty much. Even after Morgan had said she was going to put that down payment, and we put it down on paper, the interest rates just, like Morgan said, they were just killing us.
It just really didn't look like it was going to work out on paper.
No, the monthly payments were
very discouraged.
Yeah, I remember walking out of the mortgage company office and just feeling like I was defeated, just feeling down and discouraged, because, you know, those payments were still, you know, $40, $50 more than what I could honestly afford. Looking at it on paper, it wasn't going to work. We didn't think it was going to work at all. Yeah. And, you know, it wasn't possible. There wasn't any talk of me getting a raise at work. I wasn't doing anything else. I did have a part-time job, but, you know, even with all that added into it, it still wasn't going to work.
Yeah. But we just kept trusting. We left. We were with my dad. And on the way back, you know, he was talking to us. It was like we still felt like we needed to move forward with this, because we felt like this was like a gift straight from heaven, a gift God was giving us. But we were like, but God, how?
Right.
How is all of this going to work out? And so we agreed when we left that office that we were going to do like a floating interest rate for a certain amount of days. I think it was.
She said that if a lower interest rate came in, we were going to try to lock it in as quickly as we could.
But there was also a gamble with that, because the interest rates could have gone up, and we only had a certain amount of time, so we just really had to trust God with it.
Yeah. And, you know, we were definitely, at that time, just bathing it in prayer. We prayed about it. We desired it to have this house. And Morgan and I, we desired to be married. And we just started just bathing it in prayer, praying about it, saying, you know, God, if this is your will, please, God, just help us out. See, if this is your will, God, we know that you're going to do something. And, you know, for a few days, we just prayed that and prayed that and prayed that. And we purposed in our heart, you know, we were going to stay faithful to God. We were going to stay faithful to his word, and just stay faithful to, you know, giving to God, even like paying our tithes, just making sure that we throw that in there. And we just wanted to make sure that we were just staying faithful to what God was doing to us and just giving back to him. And so with that being said, I was at my part-time job, and I got a phone call from the mortgage company. Our lender, she had let me know that the stock market was actually crashing and interest rates were dropping like flies. They were dropping super fast. And I said, what do you mean? What does this mean for us? She said, I can lock you in on an interest rate that's pretty much unheard of. It's close to 3%, and, you know, it's, I think, 3.25%. And I was like, okay. Let's lock it in. Let's do it.
Yeah, so we were able to lock it in at that interest rate, and then we were able to, it took our monthly payment down to exactly where we needed it to be able to afford this house, which was just God.
Yeah, and we were able to even put a little extra in the savings with it. Like, it was close to $70 less than what we knew what we could afford, and then we could take that extra money and put it into savings and use it for other things. So God worked so much in that area.
Yeah, and it was also nice because my dad had been a realtor for a little bit. So we were able to, on the selling and buying end, my dad was able to kind of work for both of us.
Yeah.
And save us a lot of money on that situation. So, like, I know our house buying story isn't completely like something that's going to be cookie cutter for everybody, because we had a lot of things that just, you know, got open doors, and it just seemed like so many things, maybe even stuff that had happened years ago, 10 years ago when he moved out of that house, or so many years ago when my dad decided to become a realtor. It's like it all came together in those exact moments for us.
Yeah.
And that this is a very like specific and personal story that we're sharing, but we kind of want to give our overall meaning in this story. And this doesn't just go to buying a house. It also can apply to a lot of things in life. And that is just wait on God. Sometimes God will start working 10 years or a few years before you even realize you're going to need him in a specific situation.
Yeah.
God is always working. He is never leaving you alone. He takes care of us when we're not taking care of ourselves. He is constantly working in the background, and you just have to make sure you are waiting on God.
Yeah, and just be faithful to God. I mentioned it a few minutes ago, just being faithful to God's house, being faithful to praying, being faithful to giving to God, worshiping him and just giving him your tithes and offerings, and making sure that, those first fruits that it talks about in the Bible, those tithes that you bring in for the house of God, making sure that you're bringing those into him, because that's one of the best ways to worship God. But also, God says that he will open you the windows of heaven and pour you out blessings if you stay faithful to giving to God. And that doesn't just mean the tithes, but it means giving him your time as well and giving him your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you are faithful to God, he will be faithful to you. He's faithful to us even when we're not faithful, because that's just how good of a God he is.
Yeah.
But when you say, no matter what, maybe things are tight, but I'm not going to miss my tithe. I'm going to still give to God even when things are a little bit tight. When you are faithful to him in those areas, he really will open heaven and he will send you down blessings that you do not deserve.
And
also, just something is pray without ceasing. Make sure you're bathing everything that you're about to do. Any big decision, whether it's buying a house, getting married, whether it's, deciding on when to start a family, or maybe it's moving, or whatever you need to do, deciding on a church. Make sure you are bathing everything in prayer. And sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say pretty much the same thing. Just make sure you're bathing everything in prayer, like Morgan said, and just seeking out what God has in his word about what you're wanting to do, making sure that you're following the will of God for your life. And, God's will never go against God's word. And so following God's word and then praying about what you're wanting to do, you'll find peace in what you're wanting to do if it's God's will for your life. God gives you that peace if that's what he wants you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of our story. That's what we wanted to share. And like I said, I know it seems like, oh, wow, that's a very specific story, and that, a lot of those details are something, that might not exactly help me in my specific situation. That was what God did in your specific situation. Yeah. But please don't lose focus of the overall of what God can do in your situation. He can be that personal for you too in your whatever situation you're in. He is a personal God, and he is working in all of our lives, and he can use things, the ordinary things of life, or things that will happen. He will use those to make things beautiful in his time. You just wait on him, stay encouraged, stay in his word, be faithful to him, and just bathe it in prayer.
Yep, that's it. And that's all we have for this evening. Thanks for listening.
Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and rate us. We are also uploading these podcasts to YouTube. Our channel will be linked below.
If you don't have time for an entire podcast episode, check out the 60-second Bible Food for Thought on our YouTube page. If you are listening on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.
Feel free to email us at littleismuchmerch@gmail.com if you have any specific topics you would like for us to cover in a future episode, or if you would like to just say hi.
On some of our podcast episodes, we leave a Q&A on Spotify. We'd love it if you would participate.
We appreciate you listening.
And remember, little is much when God is in it.